economy structure on that. And also we invited for several major experts to be here discussing with Mr. Rifkin. We have Tsinghua University Low Carbon School, also the Chinese Climate Institution, the former Vice President.
I'm not hearing any interpretation whatsoever at this point. Zero.
You should.
Could you hear me? Could you hear me?
I didn't hear any of that interpretation. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just doing introduction to open now.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. 中国科学院科技战略咨询研究院副院长兼可持续发展研究所所长，第13届全国人大常委会
We have the 13 standing committee member, Mr. Wang Yi. We have the Center for Information Industry Center and Fuxi Think Tank Institution and the Vice President Association of the Internet Association. And we have the China Academy of Science, Technology, and Xu Xiaodong, and CCG President, Advisor for the Council of State Council, Wang Huiyao. Thanks so much for being here with us to support such an event. And mainly we put into this part, first we will have Wang Huiyao and to deliver us opening speech. After that, we will have Li Fujin to offer us Rifkin to have half an hour speech. After that, we will have discussion session between Mr. Rifkin and other experts. And then we will have the media to offer some questions to Rifkin, and we will close at 10 o'clock. And after that, we will have Mr. Wang Huiyao to represent organizer to deliver us a speech. Thanks so much for introduction.
Jeremy, can you hear? I can hear you, yes.
But also the interpretation just now?
I didn't hear any interpretation during Shang Hua's introduction, but I am hearing you in English, of course.
Okay. Maybe I'll say two parts then in that case. 那么首先哈，这个代表主办方欢迎大家。
First, I would like to represent organizers to say welcome for everybody being here. I think that is a very good timing for this.
Excuse me, sorry to interfere, but no one's interpreting for me.
Sorry, Jeremy, have you turned?
I'm interpreting.
Let me do it again.
There is the button. Have you hit the button?
I got it.
Can you hear me?
Again, sorry, everybody.
Can you hear me?
So I've got it on more. There we go.
English.
It doesn't say English. Claudia, can you help me on this? So I've done that. Nope.
There should be in the more, you have language, English or Chinese.
Yeah, it says language interpretation. I've got it. English. Yeah, I've got it.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Sir? Professor.
Let me hear now. Can you
interpret? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Okay, sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, why don't I go ahead? Okay.
First, I would like to represent the organizer to say welcome for Dr. Rifkin and for every expert to join us in such an event. And very scholars and experts are here with us for this webinar here. Just like I mentioned, it's really a good time here. Including the CCG, we have hosted more than scores of events in the past several months, and we have hundreds of experts from all different countries to have conducted their discussions mainly on trade or economy and for...
Sorry, it is just, I'm getting no interpretation even though it says it's in English. I'm getting nothing.
Can you hear me? Anybody can hear me? I'm on the English channel.
I have English checked.
Yeah, I think through the chat, can I ask Claudia and colleagues from CCG to work out the technical details?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, perhaps
okay, so I would suggest just to continue, and then I'll give my talk and we'll go from there.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Why don't I maybe speak in English then?
English.
Well, that would be great.
Yeah.
That would be good.
Most of people can hear. Okay. So first of all, on behalf of organizer, I want to welcome Jeremy Rifkin, to give you a great sharing of your book, also your latest thinking on those great stuff. And also, I'm very pleased to welcome all the great experts that we gather here tonight on this webinar event. I think this webinar is really held very timely because we've been holding webinars over 2,000 of them and been involved hundreds of international experts, but mostly concentrated on the pandemic itself, but also on economic, trade issues, food. Yet this is the first time we're having a webinar on the sustainable development, on the low carbon and climate change issue. So this is really relevant. And as a matter of fact, when we reflect on the pandemic, it's probably true that we didn't give enough respect to the nature, to the climate, and to the environment that we are living in. So it's absolutely important that we have to. It's a wake-up call for us to respect this environment and to really work together. So I think we are very pleased that we can invite you, Jeremy, to really attend this event. Also to talk with our Chinese audience. So we normally have no problem with this interpretation in the past. I hope that they're going to fix that up as well. And then even for the English, we have a very good live coverage in China. So normally it's through our live webinar, the audience ranging from 500,000 to 1 million, so many people tuned in to watch and listen. So anyway, I don't want to spend too much of the time. I want to give the floor to Jeremy, and also I want to hear all the great experts that we've been invited to this platform. And so I just want to briefly mention CCG. CCG is one of the top top 100 think tanks in the world, actually, consecutively ranked in the last 3 years in the top 100. And we actually cover a wide range of issues on globalization, global governance, and global trade, and global migration. And of course, climate change is one of the key areas we are very interested in. And we have almost 100 in-house research staff, and we want to continue to do this in area. And also, I'm very pleased. I want to thank Changhua for to moderate tonight, and also I welcome all the experts to participate and to share the great view. So this will serve as a very good focus on this neglected issue. And I think your book and your with CITIC Publication House, we really bring this attention to a new level. And for that, I want to thank you and thank all the participants, and particularly our panelists. Thank you. I just want to conclude it here.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Harry Wang. And without further ado, so now the floor is yours, Jeremy. And let's welcome Dr. Jeremy Rifkin for his keynote speech. The floor is yours. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Changhua. Let me say it's a real pleasure and an honor to be with the distinguished participants in this seminar today. Thank you so much. Let me start off by talking about the pandemics. Pandemics are not specific to a specific country. Let us be clear what's going on here. There is a clear relationship between the escalating number of pandemics we have had over the last many years and climate change. We've had 5 major pandemics over the last decade, and there's going to be more. And the reason is twofold. First, it has to do with economic development. We have begun to encroach upon the rest of the planets and the wild parts of our Earth. A century ago, about 80% of the planet was still wild, still wilderness. Today, only 23% of the entire Earth is still wilderness. The rest is under human development. Our UN bodies tell us that we are now using 1.5 Earths in terms of human economic development. So what's happening as the wilderness shrivels, it means that the wildlife is coming closer to human civilization. And that is causing more interactions and pandemics. At the same time, climate change is now inducing more pandemics. We are seeing, as the temperature rises on this planet, we are seeing a change in the water cycles, the hydrological cycles, more dramatic snows in the winter, more spring flooding around the world in the spring, more summer droughts and wildfires, more fall hurricanes and typhoons. And so what's happening is our ecosystems cannot catch up to this runaway shift in the water cycle, and they are collapsing in real time. What this means is mass migrations. Human beings are migrating. The wild animals are migrating as well. And now the viruses are hitching a ride on the animals and migrating too. So we have human migration, animal migration, and virus migration, and more encroachment on human society. So we will see more pandemics. The issue is, can we take this existing crisis and turn it into an opportunity? We need now to look at a long-term recovery, a 1,000-year recovery that will allow us to completely change the way human beings interact on this earth. We have one country now in official policy who has begun to make this move. It's the People's Republic of China. You made an historic change in your constitution, and you're the first country that's done this, that said that all future development in China must adhere to the principles of nature. You call this the ecological civilization, that all development, social and economic development, must be in tandem and be congenial to the principles that allow life to flourish on this earth, to nature itself. This is the first time any nation in history has declared this as a principle of its future governance. So we are beginning to see a dramatic change. But let me say this, even before this existing pandemic, we had realized that growth, GDP in the world has been slowing now for 20 years because we're living on an old, tired, outdated infrastructure of industrial revolution of the 20th century. And so GDP is slowing because productivity has been declining for the past several decades. The result is we have a deteriorating global economy, we have increasing pandemics, and we now have real-time climate change. Our scientists are telling us that we are now in the 6th extinction event of life on Earth. It doesn't even make the headlines. This is the most important moment in human history, in our 200,000 years of modern human beings being on this planet. Our scientists say that we've had 5 major extinction events in the last 450 million years. And each time there was massive die out and millions of years to recover with new life. We are now in the 6th extinction event, and everyone in China needs to listen to this, as well as my fellow Americans. Our scientists tell us we could lose over half the species on Earth in the next 8 decades. The last time we had an extinction event of this magnitude was 65 million years ago. There are young babies in China, in America, in Europe, in Africa, and Asia today who will be here in 8 decades from now. So we are in a crisis, and we need now to create a new narrative, a new vision for the world. So we need to look back and ask, how do the great economic paradigms in history occur? If we know how they occur, we're going to get a roadmap in China and the rest of the world, and a compass to navigate a new journey for the human race, hopefully to address climate change, to create a more sustainable, resilient society, to create what China calls the ecological civilization, and what we call in Europe the Green New Deal. So there have been at least 7 major economic paradigm shifts in history. They're very interesting. They each share a common denominator, and that is at a moment of time, 3 defining technologies emerge across a civilization and converge to create an infrastructure that fundamentally changes the way humanity communicates, powers its society, and moves its people across the economic and social realms. What are those 3 technology revolutions that changed civilization in history? Number 1, new communication revolutions that can bring larger numbers of people together in more diverse, complex relationships to manage their day-to-day life. Number 2, new sources of power and energy to allow larger, complex, and diverse populations to engage in economic and social life. Number 3, new modes of mobility and logistics to allow us to move larger numbers of people around and engage in economic and social life and governance. When communication revolutions converge with new energy revolutions, which in turn converge with mobility and logistics revolution, it changes our temporal spatial orientation. It brings large numbers of people together in complex, civilized environments. It changes our business models. It changes our governance. I'll give you 2 examples. In the 19th century, the first industrial revolution in Britain, the communication revolution was steam power printing and the telegraph. And then the new energy regime was coal. And the new mobility was railroads across national domains. This communication, energy, and mobility infrastructure changed our built environment. We went to large, urban, dense, and urban environments. It gave us national markets, nation-state governance. The 20th century, a second industrial revolution in the United States, another communication, energy, mobility, and logistics shift. The communication revolution was the telephone, as important as the internet today, bringing large numbers of people together over time and space. The new energy regime in the US and the second industrial revolution was cheap oil, Texas oil. And the new mobility and logistics revolution was the internal combustion engine. Henry Ford put out millions of vehicles, and we brought people together. This second industrial revolution took us from urban to suburban building habitats. We went from national markets to globalization and new governing institutions like the OECD, the IMF, the World Bank, the UN. This second industrial revolution, based on fossil fuels, is now dying. It's dying in real time. We are now, however, on the cusp of a third industrial revolution, and I will say it's being led by the European Union and the People's Republic of China. Be very clear. It is not being led by the United States at this point. So this puts a big responsibility on these 2 great superpowers. Here's the revolution, and if this becomes clear to everyone here, it's because you are engaged in it. You are leading the world in this. The communication revolution is the internet. We now have 4.5 billion people connected with cheap cell phones in real time, communicating across distance and bringing humanity together all around the world. Now this digital revolution in communication is now converging with a second digital revolution, and that is a digitized energy internet, which is going to allow millions and millions of people in their homes, in their neighborhoods, in their local businesses to produce their own solar and wind energy and electricity, and then share it across national and continental electricity internets, sharing solar and wind electricity across continents using the same digital technology we use now to share information, news, and knowledge on our communication internet. The 2 internets are converging. Now these 2 internets, the communication internet and now the continental energy and electricity internets, are converging with a third internet. And this is a mobility and logistics internet. It's all digitized, and it's made up increasingly of electric and fuel cell transportation vehicles powered by solar and wind electricity from the energy internet, and using the same big data and algorithm governance that we use for news, knowledge, and entertainment on the communication internet, we're now using to help steer autonomous transportation on the electricity internet. These three internets, communication internet, the electricity internet, and the mobility internet, are riding atop a platform, the Internet of Things. All of our buildings, residential, commercial, industrial buildings, are going to be retrofitted to make them resilient to climate change events. They are then being transformed into nodes, N-O-D-E-S. These nodes will have edge data centers, so across China and the world, there'll be data centers to store data everywhere. And they will also be, every building will also be a micro power generation site for solar electricity. Every building becomes a charging station for your electric vehicles and a storage battery for your energy. The buildings of the Internet Things connect up to the communication internet, the electricity internet, the mobility internet, and create, if you will, a new infrastructure to communicate, to power, and to move economic and social life across China, and hopefully by extension with the Belt and Road Initiative across the world. This, in a sense, is the framework in which we see the future. So in Europe, we have what we call a two-part plan. And I've been privileged to work with the leadership of the European Union for the last 20 years leading up to this plan. Our plan is Digital Europe and the New Green Deal. We are bringing digital infrastructure together with a Green New Deal to transform society and create a more sustainable relationship to the ecology of the planet. So this is where we're going. And I would say this, what we are seeing now in Europe is that the major sectors are now decoupling from the fossil fuel civilization. And this is very important for China to hear. All right? So this is very important for China to hear. The energy sector is now decoupling from fossil fuels. And here's the reason why. What we learned in Europe is that when solar and wind electricity became cheaper, it created a crisis for the fossil fuel civilization. As of 2019, the levelized cost of solar and wind electricity have now plunged below the cost of nuclear, oil, coal, and natural gas. I want everyone to hear this in China. We are now seeing the utility scale solar and wind as the cheapest energy in the world in real time as of 2019. What this means is that Citibank a number of years ago saw this happening, and they said we could be sitting on $100 trillion in stranded fossil fuel assets because solar and wind are now cheaper and the market is speaking. When we mean stranded assets, we mean all of the coal, oil, and gas that will never be taken out of the ground because it will not amortize out because solar and wind is now cheaper. It's all of the pipelines that we will not need because solar and wind is cheaper. All the refineries that will be abandoned. So we're looking at the largest bubble in history, an economic bubble. It's the carbon bubble. And the new studies and reports that we have in the book that's now been published in China, these reports are in the last 18 months from the banking community, the insurance industry, the various sectors of the economy. And they're reporting that we may see the collapse of the fossil fuel civilization with a carbon bubble with trillions of dollars of standard assets somewhere around 2028. So this is an inflection point. And what we've learned in Europe is that it's moving very quickly, and also in China. So my hope here today is that we can have a robust conversation and learn from China, because in your 13th five-year plan, you began to move toward this idea of a zero carbon society. Now in your 14th five-year plan, we're hoping that China will bring all of this together. and lay out to show the world by laying out an infrastructure across China that's totally digital to bring together communication, renewable energy, mobility and logistics, and the Internet of Things across the building environment, to create the new businesses and the new jobs, and to take us to a zero carbon society. And what you call the ecological civilization, and what we in Europe and now increasingly in America call the Green New Deal. So it's a tremendous opportunity and responsibility. But I will say this in closing: we're not going back to where we used to be. We're not going to be able to see the world that we knew for the last 10,000 years. We are moving from the age of progress, a Western idea, to the ecological civilization and the age of resilience. China will have to help us around the world understand how we become more resilient, how we change our vision of the world so we learn to be more self-sustainable, how we can move from globalization to glocalization. We still connect around the world, but China can show us how we can be resilient and self-sufficient when needed in our own communities. China needs to help show us how we can protect our community's biosphere in every region of China. China needs to help us also understand how we can begin to move from a geopolitical world based on protecting fossil fuels. And you know, millions of people have died in 2 world wars to protect fossil fuels. We now need China to help us move from a geopolitical world to a biosphere world that's in tandem with, if you will, the principles of an ecological civilization. So I'm hoping that that will be a helpful beginning of a conversation this morning.
Thank you, Jeremy, very much for the keynote speech. Now I'm going to ask our experts and to have their comments and also questions for discussion. 何校长，那么下面我们就进入到这个评述和这个互动的环节。
Now we come to the interaction session. First, we have the President He to offer his comments, and on this, and we know you wrote the episode for this book. Really honored for that. Thank you. And I read Dr. Rifkin's book for the zero carbon emission very carefully. And the third industry book, and I read that also very carefully.
I'm so sorry to interfere. I'm not getting interpretation. So I suggest that you do it in Chinese, and then Chenghua, you can interpret afterwards in English, okay?
I will, yeah.
All right, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah.
好，我觉得这个零碳社会，应该说确切的讲，应该是一个
Zero carbon society is mainly about zero carbon emission society. To assure that the emissions, the carbon dioxide, and also the absorption of carbon dioxide can be balanced. So we call it zero carbon emission. Does that mean that we are canceling carbon, or we are making a balance here to ensure that the carbon emissions and carbon absorption can have a balanced situation? It's mainly for stabilization of the carbon dioxide proportion in the air to counter the very crisis of the climate change. Especially to control the temperature rise, to be within 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees. The goal here at the latter half of this century and to the middle of this century to realize the goal of the carbon zero, what we call zero carbon. And such a goal here is really urgent. That's to say that the human society, we need to protect the very safety of the globe. we need to protect the societies. We must build the zero carbon society, and to realize the zero carbon society is not far from us. We must do what we can to realize such a goal. To face climate change, to protect the security, which caused a lot of changes for the whole society. And from the power aspect, I would like to say that use renewable energy and regenerable energy as a very main energy supply, and to be as a major part of the power supply to replace the traditional fossil fuel energy supply. What is a really high carbon traditional way to realize a balanced carbon emission and to end the fossil fuel. In one aspect, we must to do what we can to revolute about the energy and to use the new energy to renewable energy to replace the fossil energy. Second, we need to ensure that the society, the social society, need to have a restructuring. The green, low carbon, and cyclable, and to end where we are, which were mainly relying on the high emissions and high consumption of the carbon material or traditional way of industrial civilization. The traditional way of the industrial civilization cannot last. We must shift to the civilization of ecosystem. That means the human beings and the society and the nature should be balanced. To have more balanced and coordination between all the elements. And given such a transformation, and there are new rounds of industrial revolution and energy revolution. The new round of energy revolution featured about the smart technology and low carbon as the very major features of that. And for the smart technology development is very crucial to improve the social and economy efficiency, to improve the resources application efficiency. That is very crucial. And that is also beneficial for saving energy and to save the emissions of carbon. Such an industrial revolution development would be very crucial for us to realize about zero carbon economy, and which is very crucial for the economic development and the energy supply balance. To use regenerable energy to supply the economic development, that is the new structure. That is also about the eco-civilization, very base and very project for us to realize such a transformation. That is very crucial for our consuming and our consumption of consuming, our values of consumption, our understanding of the futures, and our value on how to use the future will all be changing, and people's awareness on the environment protection becoming more and more severe, and people has more and more better understanding on the environment. And for the pursuit of the future and the pursuit of the material will be curbed with restrictions on damage to the environment. The awareness, the understanding has been changing. That is also very important for building the very environment for eco-civilization. And facing the globalization, climate change is very common interest for the human beings. It needs all the effort from all the countries. And it also needs the social sector and enterprises, as well as private sector, all need to be getting engaged into such effort all together. That's why China is advocating such a eco-civilization very actively, and taking that principle as a very leading role, and for us to guide us to change, to be building a new green economy. That's why China is still working on building about global civilization, eco-civilization, to build the common future for the human beings. Only we, all the countries and all the people, can work together, and given such a very guideline, and all join hands to work together to walk on that path. And only through that we can realize a Green Deal, to realize a zero carbon society. And in that way, human beings and nature can be harmonious and coexisting, and the society, economy can be sustainable. I think that Rifkin's book is very fine-sighted and has very in-depth understanding and in-depth description on the future perspective. That is very crucial guideline for cooperation between all the actors, and that is also very helpful for the description on the threat of human beings. That is facilitating the building of eco-civilization and sustainability. That is all a very crucial facilitation. We anticipate Mr. Rifkin's new books in the near future will come to be published soon and to be read by the Chinese readers in the near future. Thank you. I would like to
do the translation for you quickly. Professor He has read in detail the new book as well as the Third Industrial Revolution, so he has a very good understanding of the contents. In this view, zero carbon society, the essence of the term actually means net zero growth of greenhouse gas emissions there. Because we have to achieve the balance of the emission sources as well as the carbon sink. So achieving carbon neutrality. So that's more like in the context of the title, Zero Carbon Society. Globally, as you mentioned, climate change is a big challenge, and through the Paris Agreement, and we will set the target of control the temperature rise below 2 degrees Celsius, or ideally 1.5 degrees. So the target is set already and embraced by global community, meaning that by mid of the century, at least in the second half of the century, globally we need to achieve carbon neutrality, to achieve net zero carbon emissions there. This is a rather pressing target for global community to achieve. It's very important that the ecological security, and it has been recognized as an important part of human survival and development. So carbon neutral or zero carbon society is the only option, or the must-have option for us to achieve. Actually, even the Paris Agreement target is not that far away. It's literally here on the table for us to work together. In that process, tackling climate change, protect the ecological and biological security, and we need to fundamentally transition our economic and social development around energy, and so particular, focus on new energy and renewable energy, and to replace the fossil fuel system or infrastructure. So in the end, we have to achieve carbon neutrality. In the process of advancing energy revolution, we need also fundamentally to shift how we grow our economy and develop the society. And green, low carbon, and circular are the fundamental features of how we grow our economy. In that process, we need to transit quickly to a new industrial revolution to replace the old industrial revolution. And so in China, we call it ecological civilization, with a particular focus on the harmony or balance between man and nature. in the new industrial revolution, and we emphasize smart, digital smart, and also low carbon, as you mentioned. And through the smartness or digitalization, we'll be able to fundamentally enhance economic productivity, but also enhance the efficiency of natural resources there. Of course, low carbon has to be, we have to save energy, transition our energy towards clean energy in order to reduce the emissions there. So the trend is very, very clear. That's why we all call it's ecological civilization. In that context, human behavior is also changes also fundamental. So we know all the transition will also impact how we consume, how we produce and also how we consume. So we need people also to shift the worldview, their value, and how they see wealth there as well. So generally, a societal awakening to the ecological civilization is also needed there. Climate change is a globally shared target and is for the benefit of humanity, which requires common efforts. And China is actively advancing ecological civilization and also accelerating transition of its economy, its energy, and its society. But we all know in order to achieve the goal, that's going to require a global ecological civilization evolution process, and requires global joint efforts to achieve green, low carbon, and circular economy, as your term, low carbon society. Looking into the future, and I think, and there's a background to your book. The new book actually is very forward-looking, and it's deep and in-depth analysis, and which also develop a good narrative for how the future will unfold. And we all know, and in order to achieve such a future, global partnership and collaboration is really needed. So congratulations for your new book, and also look forward to your future works as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've unmuted, so maybe the interpreter will work now. I think it'll help. I think we just did that. I appreciate those comments very much. Let me talk about one thing that was just mentioned, and that is we need a new vision and a new social understanding of humanity's relationship to the planet. There's a big difference between our vision in the West and your vision in the eastern part of this planet over the last 2,000 years about human beings' relationship to nature. And in the West, we have believed through our religious traditions, our Hebraic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. We've learned in our religious traditions that nature is here for human beings to dominate. And in the book of Genesis, it talks about how God allowed Adam and Eve to name the animals, and God said, "You shall have dominion over the animals. They are here for your use." So if you take a look at the last 2,000 years of Western history, there's always been this focus that the rest of nature is here as a resource, that it's passive, that it's there to be controlled for the actual enjoyment and pleasure and advancement of human beings. So there's always been a separation between human beings, the dominant force, and nature, the passive resource. In the Asian tradition, in Confucianism and in Buddhism and in many of the Asian traditions, nature is not seen as a resource. Confucius and his disciples said that humans are part of nature, that we do not dominate, we need to actually harmonize with the natural world around us. And so if you take a look at the next 1,000 years, there is in the cultural DNA of China and the East and Asia a different view, and that cultural DNA that human beings have always been a part of and must harmonize with our fellow creatures, our environment, our ecosystems in the natural world. So it should not have been a surprise to civilization that China was the first country in its constitution to call for an ecological civilization. Now, we have woken up to that reality in Europe. In the last 20 years, as I've worked with the leadership of the European Union and our heads of state, we have come also to believe that human beings are one of many agents in nature. Nature is full of agency, and that we need to learn to live with and to listen to and to respect and to be a good partner with the natural world. We call this the Green New Deal. What's interesting to me is our young people are waking up. I've been very heartened by these Friday for Future events, where in the last year and a half, millions and millions of young people in 141 nations left their schoolrooms, left their local businesses, and peacefully walked out into the street and called for a climate emergency and for a Green New Deal. And what's interesting about these very peaceful protests is that they reflect a shift in consciousness, and you see it also in Asia. And that shift in consciousness is this. We've had protests all through history, but this is the first time we've seen two generations of human beings. That's the millennials and Gen Zs across every country. And they're now thinking as a species. They're not thinking in terms of their own personal interest or their own political interests or their own business interests, but they're beginning to see themselves as an endangered species. Our young people in China and around the world are beginning to see themselves as a species. And they're beginning to perceive their fellow creatures as part of their evolutionary family. And if they're imperiled, we're imperiled. And we have a young generation in China and around the world who are beginning to understand that the biosphere is our indivisible community, that we live and we flourish by our ability to harmonize, as the Chinese tradition would say, with the natural world. So what we're beginning to see is a global shift in consciousness from a geopolitical world based on protecting fossil fuels and the interest of the very well-off. Now we're moving to a biosphere consciousness, where young people in China around the world are beginning to understand what China means by the ecological civilization. So I think that Asia is in good stead to lead this new revolution. But I would say this, in Europe, our Green New Deal, our digital Europe, has been a forerunner. And I suspect that what we're going to see in the future is a coming together of the European Union and the People's Republic of China. And depending on what happens in the United States, maybe next year we will also see the United States join. We need all three of these great superpowers to understand that the digital Green New Deal and China's Internet Plus ecological civilization are basically the same vision. They're the same game plan. And if we can begin to understand that, we can lay out this infrastructure. We have just finished a report that has not been published yet. I brought together the leading industries and businesses in America who will know how to put this transition in place. And in this report, here's what we see. And this is true everywhere. We need to lay out in the United States and Europe and China, each continent needs to lay out a high volume, distributed current, power grid, and energy internet, so that across continents, everyone can produce their own solar and wind electricity where they work, where they live, in their neighborhoods. And what they're not using, they can share back on a continental and hopefully across oceans digital internet, so that we begin to share the energy of the world, solar and wind. So when the sun is shining in one part of the world, you can share that electricity with another part of the world. When the wind is blowing in one continent, we can store it and share it with another continent. This takes us to a shared biosphere. This brings humanity into a shared, if you will, space. I think that the Belt Road Initiative is an interesting introduction to where we could go. And I'm hoping in the future that the European Union and China would share a common landmass, the largest in the world, Eurasia, can work together. We have differences. There are things that have to be ironed out. But the big picture, Europe is China's largest trading partner. China is Europe's second largest trading partner and about to be their first. I have no doubt that Europe and China will come closer together and lead the world into a new infrastructure, a global Belt and Road infrastructure, if you will, that will allow us to begin to see that we live on one planet. Last thing, what we've learned here with this pandemic and what we've learned with climate events is that no one can be spared and no one can be isolated. That everything each of us does in our own life, how we live, how we consume, how we deal with equality and poverty, everything that we do in our day-to-day life affects someone else, some other family, some other species, some other ecosystems around the world. The lesson we're learning is we are all interconnected. That's the lesson of climate change. That's the lesson of pandemics, that each of our individual survival depends on how we relate to and share this earth with each of our other human beings, our fellow creatures, and the ecosystems that we live. If we can learn that lesson, we can then begin to create a resilient society. The age of progress was only for a few on the planet. The coming age of resilience means that everyone needs to be responsible for their own country and their own communities and their own neighborhoods and their biosphere. But together we share, if you will, our relationship with each other and learn to live with our fellow creatures. This is what we mean by an ecological civilization. And it's a digital interconnectivity of the entire human race across the planet.
Sure. Thank you, Jeremy, and for that feedback. And now let me invite Professor Wang Yi to give his remarks, comments, and questions. Thank you. 王院长。您现在是静音的，院长。王院长，您是静音。
OK， 现在翻译好了吗？是说中文。
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Professor? Doctor?
Our interpretation is working. Actually,
can you hear me?
English translation and perfect Chinese translation.
Yeah.
Switch on.
Not here.
I'm not getting it. I'm not getting it.
You,
even though it said unmute and I unmuted it. So I think we'll just continue and I can Changhua can translate, I guess, because I'm not getting that the translation in Chinese to English.
那王院长，再不你为了节省时间，您就讲英文也行。王院长，你也可以讲学英文吧，说英文吧。他现在不是他的为什么？
咱们
为什么他那个不行？
听众是对我们，主要是我们俩交流，还是我们有好的其他的？
你无所谓，你不用管别人。就咱们现在线上交流。
Now we are discussing with each other online, and now we use English just for you.
Okay. Thank you very much for invitation to attend this event. First of all, I would like to congratulations to the new book, another bestseller. The very interesting book. I read in Chinese, but not English. But maybe the translation get some understanding of the. But I think the main idea is okay. But the translation in Chinese is a carbon-free society. But basically, I think it's good. It's equivalent to your global green new green deal. So I think the first comments I think this published is very timely because in the context of COVID-19 pandemic and how to think about the current situation and how to reshape the future of the mankind, I think is very, very important. The second one, I think this book, to continue your past, bestsellers, including the third industrialization revolution, and also the the zero marginal cost society. I think to follow your past trends and combine not only the focus on the one problem, for example, the environment and all the energy, but you connect the whole the components, including the energy revolutions and the internet, digital internet connection, and also the social and economic transitions. I think that's very, very important, and how to link those in fact each other and connected. So I think it's very important, and we learned a lot from your new book, and that's my second point. The third point is you give a very big judgment about the collapse of fossil fuel in 2028. I think it's a very, very important judgment. And in current situation in China, we also have a lot of discussion on this. And what's the future? And how to judge the future's trends. And so I think, especially in the short-term economic recovery, I think because why this judgment very important, because we have so many uncertainties, and including the COVID-19 pandemic, and also the economic recovery. So I think the current choice will decide the future color of economy. So now we choose maybe the black or green, grow and the green colors were very important. But I think in China, even some industry, the highway and the chemical industry, they have very strong interest group, including the coal industry, and also some province based on the coal productions. For example, in Shanxi, in Inner Mongolia province, I think the heavy depends on the coal. So I think in the future, I think how to give a big judgment for the future. We should follow up traditional industry or embrace the future. I think it's a big challenge for China. In my opinion, I think we should consider how to link the short term with medium and long term planning or roadmap. I think in your book, you give a very good roadmap to achieve the future and how to face the collapse of the fossil fuel. But I think it's not easy. Even for China, I think you give a very very good name to China, and maybe China will show the world how to go to realize our ecological civilization and push the green development. But I think we also have a lot of challenge and difficulties to resolve. For example, renewable energies. Now, China, price of the renewables reduce rapidly, but we enter a new stage, which we call it the high share for renewables. So the current situation and the current policy is totally different from the first phase of renewable development, because we need a package. We need a system engineering, not only the renewable technology itself, but also smart technology and storage technology, and also the distributed system, energy supply system. So how to become a new system? So we need a system reform, system package, system solutions. And also we have a very strong policy. We have a lot of detail to carry out and to fit the future's structure. And also think about the social and economic transitions. I think the same problem. And so it's not only the policy change, but also we need to change our technology, change ideas, change the management system, and also establish a new, better governance system. So I think, and we also make a balance between the different instruments in interest groups. So I think we need a lot of work to do. As the second biggest economy, but China not, still as a developing countries, the per capita GDP only just 10,000 US dollars. So I think China cannot take the lead alone to provide global public goods. So we need a cooperation with Europe, with the United States, and also the other developing countries. Even for the BRI, I think we have many BRI countries little behind of China, so the different stage of development. So it's more difficult to leapfrog for the future. So I think we need cooperation. But the current situation, for example, the decoupling situation very serious. I think to spread from China-US to the China-EU and also the other countries. So how to deal with these situations and how to got a common sense for green recovery or green stimulus. I think we should more discussion. We should have more solutions and more policies. So I think even to manage the transitions, manage the risks, to share the cost of transitions, I think that we should have do a lot. I remember in 2015 we cooperated with between the China EU organization and also the Europe to push the smart green development. But I think in the future we should continue this approach to push the green development with the digital and other technology revolution. And also I think we should do this step by step, not it's one solution with multiple step solutions. And we also need direction, the multiple goals, roadmaps, and also prioritize our tasks. We should go the step by step, and then move to the green and the sustainable future. That's my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice to hear your comments. Let me discuss what we've learned in Europe, because it's a lesson that others hopefully will need to know. What we found is that when the levelized cost of solar and wind became competitive and cheaper, the utility scale solar and wind became cheaper than natural gas, way cheaper than coal and nuclear. What we found was this, and it started in Germany. As you know, I worked with Germany on this transition as well as the EU. Back around 2006 or 7, maybe only about a few percentage points of the electricity were solar and wind. 93, 94, 95% was the old fossil fuels and nuclear power. So the power companies did not think that there was much competition here. What they didn't realize is that when we began to put in feed-in tariffs and that dropped the price and technology began to move exponentially, solar and wind plummeted in price. It used to cost $78 fixed cost for one solar watt. Today it's 43 cents, one fixed watt. In 18 months from now, it'll be 35 cents. We now have power and utility companies in America and Europe quietly buying long-term 20-year contracts for solar and wind at 5 cents, 4 cents, 3 cents, 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So what we learned in Germany is it's not so important. This is important to people here. It's not so important how big the incumbent is, let's say in the electricity grid, fossil fuel and nuclear. It's how fast the challenger, solar and wind, is moving into the grid. In other words, when electricity started to compete with gas lighting a century ago, when electricity got to 3% of the lighting, it was over, because the investment community saw that the new challenger was moving so quick that the old gas lighting would not be there, and the investment shifted. What we learned in Germany, when solar and wind got to 14% of the electricity, 86% of the electricity still fossil fuel nuclear, it was over, because solar and wind were getting so cheap and moving so quick that investment started to see that the old energies were stranded. They would never pay back their investments. We lost hundreds of billions of euros because we didn't see this inflection point. It's 14%. And this is the guide you can use. When the United States now is very quickly going to 14%, 14% of our electricity will be solar and wind in 2022 or 23. It'll be over. Globally, 14% of all the electricity in the world will be solar and wind by 2028. That's the inflection point. So we're already seeing the decoupling. So the key is to minimize the losses and find a way, a just transition for the old energies, get them out quick. We believe in the new report that we have not published that I've done with American industry, we believe we can put this whole grid in 20 years. It can be done. Now, what's happened is, let's look at mobility. Today, it's still internal combustion transport. Electric vehicles are only 2% of electric mobility, and it's all being moved by China. China is moving the electric vehicles forward. By 2023, according to the studies we have in our book from industry, these are not my studies. By 2023, electric vehicles will be competitive with no subsidy with internal combustion vehicles. By 2025, they will be cheaper, electric and fuel cell vehicles. By 2028, 20% of the sales of vehicles in the world will be electric vehicles by 2028. Now, why this is important? We produce 92 million barrels of oil in the world each day. We consume them. 65% of those, 63% of all the oil we consume every day goes to transport. So what you can begin to see is this is going to happen. The market's too powerful. There will be nothing to stop it. So countries that are really dependent on fossil fuels need to really minimize the stranded assets and quickly move in to a digitized, if you will, infrastructure that can bring us into the new world. Secondly, you mentioned a new way of organizing this. In the report we have not published yet here, my colleagues, we believe that the electricity grid, the national grid, has to be a high-volume, distributed energy internet. So you can bring large-scale solar and wind from the west to the east and the east to the west. But we believe that half of the new energy, electricity, will be local, microgrids. In other words, we believe there has to be, and I want you to hear this, 70 million microgrids in the United States. Every home, every neighborhood, every office, every technology park, 70 million microgrids, and they will produce half the electricity. The large utility scale solar and wind will be the other half of the electricity. So what we see is the reason we need to do this is you need a high volume distributed national electricity internet connecting to alternative current internets, connecting to microgrids. Why is this important? This is about resilience. We will increasingly be facing climate events in China and every other country, droughts, floods, wildfires. They're going to get more severe. That means if the power lines go down, if your national power lines go down, and they should all be cable, underground, everything should go underground now. But if your power system goes down, it allows every local community, every neighborhood with microgrids to re-aggregate at a moment's notice, reassemble, distribute it, and share their electricity across their neighborhood, their community, and their region, so you never keep the lights never go off. The electricity stays on. So this is what we mean by shifting from short-term efficiency to long-term resilience. This is the lesson we're learning with the pandemics. You have to have long-term resilience. So China now needs to take its expertise to create a digitized third industrial revolution resilient infrastructure so that if you do face increasing problems with either climate events or other problems, you can reaggregate and share electricity locally and then go back onto a national electricity internet when you've recovered from disasters, from climate change. These are all crucial. So I think it's a big journey. I think you're right that there's a lot of issues in the way. If you had agreement at the national level in China and at the region, same in Europe, to quickly create the new regulations, the new standards, the new protocols that would allow you to integrate all this infrastructure, it can be put in 20 years, a zero carbon third industrial revolution infrastructure. It can be done in 20 years, but you need to have a unity and a coherence in your codes, regulations, and standards across all of your regions. Secondly, we've learned that this infrastructure has to be put in by the regions. In Europe, the continental Europe and the nation states create the incentives, the narrative, the codes, and the standards, but our hundreds of regions have to deploy the infrastructure, their local businesses. So same in China, as I know, China is very competitive. Your regions, and I love this aspect of China, it's very much like we have it. The regions are very competitive. Everyone wants to be best in show. This is a good thing. And they have expertise. So the national government rightly has set up the narrative, the ecological civilization. It set up the game plan, a digital internet plus third industrial revolution. It's setting up the vision of an ecological civilization. But now it needs to find a way to create the incentives so that the local regions, the governing regions of China, can begin to deploy a common infrastructure customized to their region, but connected across China. That will also be the Belt Road. China as the testing ground to show this will work. So you can create a resilient China where your local regions are fairly self-sustainable within a national setting. Then China can take that idea of the Belt Road, the digital Belt Road, the green Belt Road, the ecological civilization, and work with Europe together to cross Eurasia. Hopefully, next January, our next elections, we bring the United States in, and China can teach us now. You have many things to teach us from your experience in the 13th five-year plan, and so does Europe. Together, the three of us, I think, can do some really important things in terms of shifting the narrative and creating a resilience of civilization.
Thank you, Jeremy. Now I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Liu Wenqiang, and I just wonder, actually, Jeremy, the translation should work well if you somehow, put the full screen.
All right.
If you do that, then get into the language more, whatever, then find the English.
Now I'm trying to I am on the full screen with you. I just see myself in a small box here. Then I'm putting more.
The more, and then get the interpretation.
There. Now I'm off. Now maybe that was it.
You should be on. Yeah. So now I think the translation should work. So now, now I'm giving the floor to Dr. Liu Wenqiang and 刘院长，那个他应该那个翻译应该好了，你英文、中文都行，谢谢。
谢谢啊，那个李福基先生，非常高兴啊，这是你的。
Really glad to read your book, Chinese version. For me, really honor, privilege for me to hear from you. Such a privilege for me. From the third industrial revolution to the carbon-free, from the new Green New, and we have been part of translation for your book into Chinese version. And I learned carefully from what you have put in the book, from the energy and climate change and the humankind. You offer us a very roadmap for all humankind and a goal for us. And that is also very suitable for China eco-civilization building, and that is also very suits China's plans for the 13th five-year plan and 14th five-year plan. And that's also our goal. And the Green Deal has offered us a lot of passes, a lot of the very clear roadmap. After reading your book, and I learned a lot, benefiting me a lot. Your core values, thoughts on the energy, on communication, on transportation, logistics, the three major parts, the very major pillars for the human society, as you have mentioned in the book. And carbon-free also talk about a new Green Deal. A very crucial part is about the green infrastructure building, very important, and communication, internet, plus energy, internet, or the smart grid, or the smart transportation, logistics. The three parts are combined, targeting.
Right.
I think your theory is perfect. And for our third industry, while we have the three actors are combined in targeting as a very major pillar for the whole society, which is a very major cause for revolution of our industry. The core thoughts and value in your books, I think that is very aligned with each other, like the coherence with each other. The several books you have wrote, and we should learn. And I think more people should learn from the book. And after the pandemic is happening, that's accelerating. I'm not sure what happened to USA. And you have mentioned the pandemics in China. We are working on the new infrastructure. The new infrastructure actually is all about digital data centers, 5G, and internet, IoT, and smart AI. What we call the new infrastructure. Actually, that is very important base for the future infrastructure, including our logistics, transportation, smart vehicles, driverless vehicles. And also what is really very touchy for everyone is that we can get our goods, and by delivery man, they can deliver everything to your home, like very convenient for us. That is also working by the net. I think that is kind of like we are working on your theory. We are realizing your theory here. Not only about carbon-free and from the third revolution and from the, I think your structure, I think that is very valuable. A very complete theory. The third, I would like to say that you mentioned about the fossil fuel collapsing. Like one has mentioned that to 2028, the traditional fossil fuel will be turning into start a very big change. I'm not sure you will realize in 2028, but the trend will be true for sure. And our China is working under the principles of ecological civilization, and we are working on facilitating on the revolution of energy. The energy revolution here in China, several aspects has been happening currently, which will be very influencing for the future. The electricity vehicle, for the past 10 years, compared to 10 years ago, like we just started working on the electric vehicles, and 10 years we have been working on that, and far beyond our anticipation 10 years ago. And we are introducing Tesla from abroad into China. I think that electricity vehicle for the fossil fuel system will be very huge impact on that part. And all the countries, the major superpowers, if they can realize that the whole transition from the electricity, from the traditional vehicle to electricity vehicle, that would be such a big influence on the whole structure of the fossil fuel. Second part, you have mentioned about the smart grid. And we have been working on the super high voltage digital economy and technology is very helpful for the smart grid. No matter the electricity vehicle or the storage of vehicles or storage of the electricity, we need a lot of allocation technology, like distribution technology. That's why we're introducing a lot of digital tech. That's also according to your theory, like distributed electricity grid, and we have the Internet of Things will turn into the truth. And China has a lot of very huge giants like IT, like Alibaba, are working on the grid tech and how we can allocate more nodes, like for electricity vehicles. In that way, you can charge conveniently. And I think that the charging must be very convenient for them. So storage not enough. We need more better allocation for the
Right.
energy for the vehicles. The third part is that we are working on storage technology, and President He will talk about and he talk about something about that, and he is working on the project on that part. And currently, we have mainstream like lithium battery, and currently the lithium battery for the future 5 years may realize that for the new battery technology, the renewable energy only like 0.2 for the producing of the power, but for 0.2 more for storage of the power. Renewable energy to ensure the solar power, wind power can be stabilized stably. But now our cost for lithium battery will be lower than half of the total cost for storage. In that way, we only have 1/3 of the cost that we put in storage of electricity instead of the original half of the cost put into storage for the solar and wind. And once we turn that into the commercial use, that will be huge impact on fossil electricity. And that is about everyday work. And for future, for hydrogen power and for other type of storage capabilities and flexibilities for us, that will be huge change for that. And for the future, for carbon-free or the fossil fuel system collapsing, I think that's possible. We hope that your prediction will be right, and we hope you will be precise on that. And 2028, we will see a very huge restructuring and huge change on that part. That's my third comment. My first point, and currently our green policies, apart from the green policies, like people has mentioned a lot about a cyclable economy, and in Europe there are something about that happening about that, like with President Wang has been discussing with us for the 13th five-year plan for Made in China 2025. And American are working on like curbing the Made in China 2025, but we are marching forward toward the green smart. Use the IT smart tech to change traditional way of producing green. Use a very energy-saving way to change our traditional ways production, like from manufacturing center. And we are working a lot on upgrading to change traditional manufacturing, upgrading traditional manufacturing into the green manufacturing, including our digital infrastructure. And for the near future, that will be all the elements for aiming for the green, eco, and for the carbon-free. And that is also very crucial for the whole restructuring of energy for the third revolution. The time is limited, and I just offer my comments here. I'm not sure if I understand your ideas right. And we hope we can have more connection in the near future. We hope.
I hope so too. Very nice. And I'm now getting the interpretation. So we're fine now on interpretation. Let me just say a few things in passing. You mentioned hydrogen power. And there's a lot of conversation now in Europe is now declaring they want to be a hydrogen power, and now South Korea and other places. I wrote a book called The Hydrogen Economy in 2000. It was a book I published then. And then I worked with Romano Prodi, who was president of the European Commission at that time. And we introduced a research and development of several $100 million to begin the hydrogen development. Then I talked with Chancellor Merkel, and I asked her to also begin the development R&D for hydrogen development. That was a long time ago, 18 years ago. We're now ready. Hydrogen is going to be increasingly important to store green energy, solar and wind. The interesting thing here about this transition is that it can really increase our economic well-being. The report that I mentioned to you earlier that we have not published yet, in the United States, we believe that we can put this whole infrastructure in 20 years if we have the new codes, regulations, and standards. Secondly, we think that for every dollar we invest in this new infrastructure, our economic modeling shows we'll get a return of approximately $3.4 in GDP. For every dollar we invest in this digital Green New Deal infrastructure, we're going to get $3.50 increased GDP. We believe that GDP, the business as usual model, says GDP in the next 20 years will be about 1.8, 1.9%. We believe with the new infrastructure, it'll be around 2.2 to 2.3%. We believe in the studies that we have done that we will save trillions and trillions of dollars. The estimate is somewhere around 10 to 15 trillion dollars in environmental costs we've saved because we've mitigated the damage from climate change, and trillions of dollars in health costs from increasing pandemics. So the infrastructure to create a more resilient ecological civilization gives us a more efficient economy, but also an economy that uses less of the Earth's resources and uses it in a much more sharing way. So, but the key is to get the infrastructure in. Let me mention something about funding as well. There's a lot of conversation now about how do you fund this? Well, part of it will come from government, for sure. But there's also a huge amount of money available from the pension funds around the world and insurance funds and institutional funds. You know, pension funds, that's the workers' money. That's the deferred savings of millions of employees like you have in China that are then invested for their retirement. People may be surprised in China as they are in America to know that the largest pool of capital in the world is the workers' money. It's called pension funds. It's $41 trillion. The largest pool of capital in the world is the workers' money. And we also have insurance funds. That's $25 trillion. We believe that public pension funds and citizens' pension funds can be invested with long-term green bonds issued by green banks. And that investment over 20 years to lay out the infrastructure, the people's money, returns to them the interest on that so they secure their retirement. So I know that there's a robust conversation in China about rethinking your pension plans for the country, rethinking them. So what would be interesting is how this generation in China can invest those pension funds, that's their earnings, in long-term bonds that can return good investment to them and then prepare a future for their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren in an ecological civilization. It's a virtuous circle. Secondly, you want to set up green banks to issue these bonds. This is happening in Europe. It's going to happen around the world. And I know China's rethinking its pension policies. This should be part of the conversation, how to invest those funds in pursuing a ecological civilization, a digital third industrial revolution. Secondly, you have a business model in China that will change the world. And I should say it's beyond capitalism. It's called energy service companies, ESCOs, energy service companies. This plan emerged in Europe and the US, but now China has become the leader in energy service companies. You know, in traditional capitalism, you have sellers, you have buyers, you have a market, you exchange. But in traditional capitalism, it's unequal because the seller always knows more than the buyer, always. If the buyer knew everything the seller knew, you'd have a different arrangement. With ESCOs, all of the responsibility stays with the enterprise. It can be state companies, it can be private enterprise, but they're responsible for financing of some of this infrastructure with green bonds. You issue green bonds, energy service companies are financed. They have to lay out and help lay out the infrastructure in local communities, your local businesses, your SMEs, your local governments. And those businesses finance some of this infrastructure. They're responsible. And how they get paid back is by the efficiencies they secure. They can lay out parts of your electricity internet locally. They can lay out parts of your microgrid infrastructure locally. They can lay out some of your mobility and logistics infrastructure locally. They can help buildings be retrofitted so that they increase their aggregate efficiency and reduce their cost, and they get paid back by the energy savings. They get paid back by the efficiencies gained. So the responsibility lies with these companies, whether they're state or private, and they're responsible for a provider-user network. They secure all of these aggregate efficiencies and are paid back by the returns in the efficiencies they secure, performance contracts. This takes us beyond traditional capitalism, but it allows us to keep the best of enterprise. It allows us to keep the best of local businesses and cooperatives. And this is something, it doesn't surprise me that China has taken the ESCO and moved it beyond what we did in Europe and the US, because it more fits this idea of all of us responsible for each other in the economy. That's truly part of a new third industrial revolution digital future.
Okay. Thank you, Jeremy, and also Dr. Liu for the interaction. Now I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Li Xiaodong. The floor is yours. Thank you. 李老师。
让他们听到吧。
Can you hear me?
Yes, a little louder though.
Thank you.
So it's my great honor to join this great event. I mean, big congratulations on your new book, Dr. Rifkin.
I can hear you. If you just speak a little louder, interpreter, I'm good.
Okay, because I will try to speak louder. So I think I have read your books. For example, the Third Industrial Revolution, the Modern Cost Society, and Ecological Civilization, both in Chinese and English. In those versions, and I was deeply enlightened by your book and insights. And then last year, I built a new institution, which is called Fuxi Institution, to promote the digital transformation on economic development and social governance in the new era. Yeah, I mean, and that is a new era. I mean, we are in a very overlapped new era with fully challenges. For example, we are going to a new civilization. I mean, we call that is a digital civilization. And we are going to a new phase of the industrial revolution. And we are also going to the third phase of the internet. And even the internet after more than half century's development. So I think it's I'm not an expert for the other area. I just in internet industry for over 20 years. So from my point of view, I think internet will be the driving force for artificial intelligence, which is very important for our new era. I think that both internet and artificial intelligence will support the China economy development and transformation. As you mentioned, and also I really know that China get a very big benefit from the internet in this COVID-19 pandemic. And I do believe that the most successful experience of China, if eventually we can be successful in this pandemic, will be very useful for the global industrial revolution. I think it will make a big contribution for the new civilization building. As you mentioned, I think you have a big expectation for China to make contribution for the world. Maybe want China to be a leading country. Even China, we should be humble because China is also a developing country. And even we have more than 900 million internet users, but that the penetration rate for China internet is only around 65%. So that means China is a big country for internet users, even for a big country for population. But China is not a very strong country for economy and strong country for internet industry. So I think it's in China itself, we are in a phase. We try to do something combined with the plan and the market. So because we want to rely on the internet, rely on the data to do more plan, and we also want the internet can drive internet economy into a new era. So I think in the internet itself is a very important information infrastructure for China, especially for China and also for the world. It's a very important infrastructure, which will be very useful for data collection, and transfer, and sharing, and so on. So I think it's from my point of view, and also you mentioned in your book in the zero marginal cost. So the internet can make a very quick connection between the very small supply and demand, which very lowers the transaction cost. In some sense, you mentioned the energy or electricity internet also need to rely on the communication internet, because we need to merge the two internet together. So I think if we can establish a global energy internet, it means that the waste of the energy will be greatly reduced, and the power generation, the power generation capacity for the fossil energy can be fully utilized, and the energy can be globally used. Right. And for example, in China, maybe it's a dry season here, maybe it's another wet season in another place. Just like China itself, now China not only is putting on the pressure for the COVID-19, but also there is so many issues in this big country. How to make sure we can transfer the energy from this province to another province, such as in the Yunnan province, in the southwest China, this province it wastes almost 60 billion. It's a big energy waste there because the economy is not very very good, but they are very good production for the new energy. So but if we can rely on the future electricity internet, we can use this big energy to support the economy developing in other provinces. For example, just build a data center. So, but maybe in the future, if we can rely on the internet to make a good connection between the supply and demand, will improve the quality for the product, and that means we can lower down let me mean that we will reduce the overproduction and unnecessary waste. That means which will be greatly reduce the carbon emissions. We can also use the big data to forecast the future demand and then make the product according to the demand. So including the industrial area, especially in the agriculture area. But I think it's now there is two challenges. In my point of view, I also want to ask your opinion on this. So one is the digital divide. Another one is the internet fragmentation. So as you know that only 1 month ago, the Europe announced a new Digital Service Act. It's DSA. So maybe China, it's not in Europe, because I remember it's 3 or 2 years ago, there is a GDPR in Europe. But now they have a new Digital Service Act. So it's not a good news. It's a good news to protect the data, but it's not a good news for the global internet. So that means it's a very, in some situations, not a good example for the global connection. It could be a very big driving force for the digital divide and the internet fragmentation. So, and also another thing is about the 5G or so many new technologies. You know, the developed country don't want the new technology that can be used globally, especially for other developing country or area. So I mean that we have a big data divide. Compare maybe 10 years ago, the data divide is much bigger. It will be, and also will be larger in the future. Another is internet fragmentation. It also will be, much worse than before. So I think you mentioned the internet a lot, even in your new book. But if there is a big challenge for internet itself, we cannot use the benefit for internet to support the new era for the economic development, and also the new, zero carbon society. So it's my big concerns. I just want to know your opinion on this. And also, you mentioned a new plan in your book to build some kind of platform mechanism globally to solve the problem, which we predict in the next 80 years. But you know that the anti-globalization is a very big issue for the world now. If we want to build some kind of platform or mechanism to solve the global problem, I think now is a very big challenge. How we can do that, and what kind of role for China to play on this? So I don't want to speak about that. I will leave more time for you.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Jeremy, 1 second. Yeah, before you speak, I'm suggesting, for the sake of the time, I'm sort of suggesting we're shifting towards concluding remarks while you're addressing questions and comments from Dr. Li and other guests as well. And at this moment, I was told there are 470,000 people watching this online now. So thanks to the organizer jointly as well. So I leave that to you. Maybe you leave, we'll finish up by 10 sharp, but you give me a couple of minutes before I can thank everyone. Thank you.
Well, thank you. In terms of the last content and contribution, let me say a few things. I do agree that we need to have a global agreement emerging so we can share the sun and the wind all over the world. Because again, this is the way it's going to happen. We already are in studies on laying out cable systems under the ocean between Europe and America, from Alaska to Chile. They're talking about now a continental internet, from Africa to Europe, and of course from China to Eurasia, and from Shanghai to Rotterdam. I will also tell you that this internet has to go underground. You need to put this into your 14th plan, 5-year plan. You need to put cable underground in order to be resilient against climate change events. So the more you have these grids above ground, the less resilient you're going to be. Secondly, it is important to have a protocol agreed to first by Europe and China, and then hopefully America will come in to share this energy. This only works if it's shared. We're learning now about climate change that everything we do, we share, even the bad things, whether it's pandemics or whether it's climate-related events, they all get shared around the world where no one's isolated. Everything we do affects someone else, some other creature, some other ecosystem, some other part of the planet. We need to understand with the new electricity internet coming together with the communication internet and the mobility internet, we have to learn to share. For example, as I said before, this forces sharing. If the sun is shining in one part of the world, you share the electricity with the other. If the wind is sharing in some other part of the world, you share it with the rest. I do not believe there's a lot of angst about one or more superpowers controlling this. That will not happen. I don't believe it's the intention of any of the superpowers to control this, but no superpower could. If America wanted to control this, they couldn't do it, or Europe or China, because the sun and the wind are distributed. You have to collect it everywhere, where you work, where you live, in your neighborhoods. There's no centralized authority in the world, even if they wanted to, that could control all the sun and wind electricity that goes around the world, because you could easily go off grid. Anybody anywhere could go off grid and use their sun and wind locally. I don't think it's the intention of any of the superpowers to control, but to share. And I think China sees that as sharing as well. And so I think that it's very clear that the biosphere is our new community. In the biosphere, the boundaries aren't there. All the Earth's ecosystems and all the Earth spheres, the lithosphere, the biosphere, the magnetosphere, the hydrosphere, we share the spheres of the Earth. And we share the hydrological cycles of the Earth. And we share the circadian rhythms and the lunar rhythms of the Earth. And we share our destiny with the ecology of the planet. This infrastructure allows us to do that. It allows us to begin to learn that we're all in this together, not just as a species, but as part of the life of this beautiful planet. Having said that, I want to talk about just for a moment on labor and employment. While robots and AI will play an increasing role in how we manage this resilient zero carbon society infrastructure, in the short run, it's millions of jobs over the next 20 to 30 years. Robots and AI will not lay down underground cable under the land. Humans have to do that. Robots and AI do not install solar panels and wind turbines. Humans do that. Robots and AI do not retrofit buildings to make them weather resistant and put in insulation and new doors. Humans do that. Robots and AI do not lay out smart sensors across road systems. Humans do that. So this is going to mean millions of jobs. The new study we have not put out yet suggests that we will create in America in 20 years, in these 20-year period, if we do this right, 22 to 33 million net new jobs. This can happen everywhere. Now, in the long run, what's going to happen is as robots and AI become increasingly versatile over the next 20 years, there will be smaller workforces in the traditional economy. But the jobs are not going to go away. They're going to change. As we create a more streamlined and aggregate efficient infrastructure to manage our economy and therefore use less of the earth and share whatever we use and recycle it, as we learn to do that, and we have an economy where the actual communication internet converging with the energy internet, converging with the mobility internet, converging with the Internet of Things, the buildings become more, if you will, AI directed, the employment is going to shift. It already is. It's going to shift to public employment, to social employment. We're going to have millions and millions of individuals who will be responsible for managing disasters from environment and climate. We're going to need millions of individuals in public health to address increasing pandemics. They're going to come. And every few years, there'll probably be a pandemic. Then we'll have to shut down and go indoors. And we'll find a vaccine. Then a few years later, we'll come out of the pandemic. It's not going to go away. So we're going to see millions of jobs as we AI this infrastructure and put in a lot of labor to do it. Millions of jobs in public health, in environmental disaster relief, in infrastructure recovery, in a whole set of relationships that only human beings can do. Only human beings. So I don't want anyone to tell me it can't be done. This 14th five-year plan is going to be crucial for the world. You're going to set the dynamic now after the 13th plan to how to move forward to a, if you will, a ecological civilization, a digital ecological civilization. But it's crucial that China in this next plan show the world how to begin this process and scale it, and really scale it quickly. And I have no doubt this can be done in 20 years. Bring the best of your governing infrastructure, your local businesses, your local regions, working with the national government to make this happen. We have no choice. I'm an old man. I won't be here to see this. But I'm saying to all my Chinese friends, young parents, young people who want to have a family, who want to have a future, it's now up to this generation to make sure that we don't quit or that we don't go back to a second industrial revolution, 20th century. And it's important that we move ahead with a new vision, an ecological civilization that can create a zero carbon society. And it's going to be up to China and a younger generation in China and in Europe, and hopefully in America next year, to join together and make this happen. One thing I've learned in my life is so precious. We don't see any life anywhere else in the universe. It's all quiet. We have a responsibility to allow those generations not yet here to enjoy their moment. Not just humans, our fellow creatures, they have every right to their journey on this planet so that we can maintain this beautiful thing called life and allow it to flourish in the future. So I congratulate China on the ecological civilization. I want China to be the spearhead of the zero carbon society along with the European Union. And I hope the 14th five-year plan says to the world, this can be done.
Thank you, Jeremy. That's well done. And we gathered some questions from the media beforehand. I looked through from CGTN, Global Times, Economic Daily, but I feel like you pretty much covered all of them so far. And for the sake of time, I'm going to go back to Dr. Wang, Henry Huiya Wang, and to give us some sort of concluding remarks. Thank you. The floor is yours, Dr. Wang. You're on mute.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you, Changhua, and also thank you, Jamie, and all the other distinguished panelists. Excellent discussion and sharing tonight. I think that Jeremy have given a very comprehensive, very vivid coverage of what a zero carbon society looks like, and you have given a lot of vivid examples and also the theory lines behind that. I think it's really fascinating to hear this from a new angle. But also, I'm also quite pleased to hear what our fellow panelists who have shared their respective views, which are very unique and also consensus very much the same. I felt this is really great, particularly at this time, that we actually have find a common ground. We have actually seek the joint development, and also we have a lot of new thinking goes around on this discussion, and so that's actually provided a very good new angle, a new direction for us. As Jeremy mentioned, we are now just about making the new 14th five-year plan, and I think that China is now making huge advancement in terms of become a more sustainable society, and then also trying to reduce the carbon consumption in the economy. So I think this discussion is really fascinating and also stimulating a lot of new thoughts. And I really want to say that, particularly during this pandemic crisis time, we are reflecting. We are trying to be more faithful to nature. We're trying to be more. Human being actually has to work together to fight the common threat, climate change, and also reduce the become a more sustainable society is really the fundamental challenge that we're facing, and actually related to the pandemic. So I want to thank Changhua for the initiative, and also for Jeremy for your excellent sharing and discussion, particularly a new book. We want to have another. Have many more people here in China to read your book, and also we want to have this dialogue become a regular dialogue, and then have a policy impact and have more people pay attention to this, so that China can really become a more sustainable society. Also working with EU, with US, with the rest of the world to achieve the common goal of the humankind. After all, we are living on one planet. So So once again, I want to thank also President He and Dr. Li and Dr. Liu and Dr. Wang, and particularly to Changhua. So thank you, and on behalf of CCG, thank you for China and Globalization, and also our viewers. I mean, we have 500,000 viewers. So that's incredible. Such a topic again, such a high tension. Thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you. 谢谢那个王理事长。Thank you, Jeremy, for the time, and particular thank you to our leading experts 何校长、王院长、那个刘院长和李晓东主任。同时呢，非常感谢 CCG 的这个
for all the scholars and experts. Thank you so much for the staff. It's really worthwhile to organize such an event. It's kind of late in Beijing here. And good night. Thank you.